All right, what is up, everyone? This is Sam, aka Wakeman VGC, and I'm joined by Ryan, aka Piano Guy. I forget what numbers are after your name, but
27, because it's 3 cubed.
27. That's
Yeah,
what it is.
that's the only reason why.
Um, okay. How you doing, Ryan?
I'm doing good. These are the PRs I'm doing with you. Definitely, this was interesting. We were surprisingly more consensus than we thought we would be. Um,
Yes,
I
which was
I was
probably a
expecting
good
to
thing
argue
for our
with you a
sanity.
lot on these, but we were mostly on the same page. As always, kind of going into methodology, teams do not take into account player skill or play style. If you are a highly skilled player, you can always do better with a team. And also, we try to not allow our own play styles to influence our decisions. So, for example, I know Wake probably doesn't love Trick Room as much as I do, but we don't consider that whenever we're analyzing the teams. Like our own personal preferences for play style, we try to keep out as much as possible. An attempt is made to be as objective as humanly possible, but obviously we do have our own biases. But we've also at this point been on quite a few drafts. The rankings were determined by averaging both of our scores with each other. The highest score ranks lowest, and vice versa. These PRs are, of course, not predictive. PRs are always for fun. Preseason PR solely exists to analyze the teams, build some hype, and kind of discuss the strengths and weaknesses of all our comps. Wake, is there anything else that you want to add to our methodology?
No, that's about it. We actually ended up agreeing on every placement except for we had what was it, number 10 and 11 switched.
Yeah, they're tied.
Um,
Yeah, they're tied
yeah,
on this.
yeah.
So, without too much further ado, let's
But
get going.
yes. So first up, at number 12, we have the Chicago Cub Foos. They are coached by Toby, or does he go by the Tobster anymore? I don't remember.
I don't know.
But
It's his Discord tech.
so right. So this is coached by Toby. His average score was 12th, which again, because we both agreed on 12. He was the fourth pick in the draft, and he got Landorus T, Naganadel, Lycanroc. That's the Dusk form? Yeah,
Yes,
Dusk
that's the
form.
good form,
Alchemy.
as we would say.
Right, right. That's the literally that's what I call it. Is good Lycanroc. Oranguru, Druddigan, Bronzor, Amoonguss, Magnezone, Abomasnow, and Sand/Alola because I cannot process these mons today apparently. But so I think this team it definitely has like strong aspects of it, right? Like Amoonguss is like next to like a lot of this team is just kind of redirect stuff away, especially from like frail stuff like Naganadel. Um, and allow Naganadel to like either set up or does it still get nasty plot? It does, right?
I think
I
it still
mean,
does. Yeah. I mean,
it's not.
you
I
don't
know
really
it's not
need to a whole
run
lot with
super
that mon.
often,
Yeah.
right? Um, but it's got a hail mode. I to me, it just feels like a lot of these mons kind of don't like do anything for each other. Like there's a lot of shared weaknesses, like things like Magnezone. I feel it could be better as something else. What are your thoughts on this one, Ryan?
I'll give a pretty detailed analysis, or at least as detailed as I can manage to be. So this team, in terms of blitz potential, is actually a lot higher than a few teams rated above it. The sheer offensive stats of a lot of these mons, the Lycanroc, the Naganadel, the Landorus, Magnezone, those all can really output damage, like really hit harder, and they actually hit harder than some mons and even some teams that are potentially above this team. The reason it's in last, though, for us is mostly due to defensive synergy. The one of the things that you always look for, especially with your tier 1s and tier 2 picks, is how do these mons defensively go together? Because your tier 1s, you do want to be able to bring them both. So either both your tier 1s need to cover a common weakness, or they need to complement each other defensively. So in this case, we have a supportive tier 1 that is then paired with an offensive tier 1, and they both have a pretty crippling ice weakness, particularly Landorus. You can tech safety goggles to get around Amoonguss, and with no other form of redirection on the team, I imagine there's going to be a lot of safety goggles mons. And then coverage into this team is not that hard to slot. I mean, you're pretty much ice move, ground move, and then a steel type move and a fire type move. And honestly, being week 2, having most of your team have issues with ground and steel in particular, which are the two best like boosting Dynamax moves in the game. And then having your other mons have that fire weakness, which is one of the best offensive typings. It kind of, and even fighting that you're weak to as well, which while not as strong a max option, you're kind of bottom. You have 4 mons that have pretty big fighting weaknesses, which the Amoonguss does help cover a little bit. As a result, this team really just struggles in the fact that the other thing that really caught my eye was the special attackers are weak to Max Quake. So yes, Magnezone and Ganondorf hit very hard, but also if you Max Quake them, they take super effective damage, and then your Spadef is then boosted, so they can't output as much damage, which is very, very scary. I do think the Hail mode here has some potential. I also think Decorate Alcremie is kind of the best thing this team has going for it. I don't particularly know why Oran Guru's here and Bronzor. This team really doesn't have a Trick Room mode. It doesn't particularly need one. It actually needs something that to help augment its speed tiers a little bit. Landorus T is great, but it's only base 91. The fastest thing on the team is 120, and while obviously Bronzor and Amoonguss are pretty slow, Amoonguss isn't really something that's sweeping in Trick Room. It's just kind of sporing everything you can attempt to. And as a result, the team really just struggles defensively. Offensively, it's perfectly fine. In fact, quite good in a lot of respects. But it also doesn't have as much support as I would love to see. The Amoonguss and Alcremie are kind of the main supportive pieces, because I don't really know how much Oran Guru really provides for this team. And without some form of like Prankster or Fake Tears or Tailwind or just really something kind of else to really help this team out would be really helpful. So that's kind of why I ended up placing here. I do think this team has some potential. I think with some smart transactions, both to address the ground weakness, kind of get rid of some redundancies on the team. I do think this team can improve itself, but with only 3 transactions, you're going to have to be extremely cautious with what you go for. Do you have any additional thoughts,
Yeah,
Blake?
I was gonna say another thing with that ice weakness, and this might not be a major thing, but it's again part of the whole like defensive synergy thing. Is like this team has to actually be really careful about when it sets hail, in my opinion, because like if hail is up, then the opponent can click blizzards, and like this team does not want to take blizzards.
No.
Like again, I mean, if you're leading hail, and I mean, it's just something to be to keep in mind for Toby. But like, yeah, I was gonna suggest that maybe like a Rangaroo could be dropped for like a low tier Tailwind. I feel like he could also do to maybe drop the. Honestly, like I like Lycanroc a lot, but I'm not sure it's needed here.
I don't disagree. It feels like there's some role niche overlap with the Landorus a little bit.
Yeah, and just like the fact that it's another ground weakness. Like even if you dropped it for like a bond that's like a
more
very
than anything, it's
role,
another
but not
steel
ground.
weakness. When
Yeah,
you already have
right.
the Obama Snow and the Alolan Sandslash that have the steel, and the Alcremie. When you have 4 mods weak to steel
Sandslash,
and 2 of them are physical attackers, that's a little scary. It's kind of the same issue with
Sandslash
the
isn't weak
special
to it,
attackers, but to a lesser degree with the Max Quake.
right.
I would actually consider
Well,
dropping
Sandslash,
Magnezone for like a Jolteon, maybe.
yeah, and that
I
would
don't
free
know.
up. Oh no, they're in the same tier, right? Yeah.
I think so,
Um,
but I
I
don't know.
was
There's
I
a
was
lot
actually
that
gonna
can be
say,
done here. This is hopefully helpful for Toby. My DMs are always open if you want to chat further. Let's go ahead and move on though to our next team, which was a tie. So the Nexus Ironworks. I'll go ahead and start the breakdown on this one. We have Rillaboom,
yep.
Blastoise, Weezing, Drifblim, Beartick, Clawitzer, Shuckle, Alolan Marowak, Tapu Koko, Aurorus, and Magikarp. So it's kind of weird to say, but you're not getting any value out of your tier 5s, which, yes, it's tier 5, right? But like, that's effectively 2 Pokemon down. Shuckle doesn't. I'm sorry, guys. Shuckle's kind of a meme Pokemon. It's not even with the meme things that it like supports well on this comp, it can be suitably annoying, but that's really its only niche. And it's a Magikarp. Come on, I mean, maybe you'll get Flail off one time. Awesome. That's all it'll ever theoretically do. Uh, so that kind of does that hurt the team initially. Just like looking at the team, I was like, okay, the tier 5s aren't doing anything, which is 2 slots of your team, which is kind of significant in a league like this, especially where last season we had a lot of good tier 5 usage, especially from top players. However, I do respect sure. Magikarp. Going for a Magikarp is very respectable. So into kind of the core of the team. So Rillaboom's great. Tapu Koko is great. The problem is that they don't have terrains that operate well together. Rillaboom really likes grassy terrain up. And if you're running Gmax Rillaboom, then you also don't get your terrain control back if Koko comes in. You really want Grassy Glide for the priority because that's really where a lot of its power comes from, and you want it in that terrain. So the electric terrain overriding that's bad. And then the other problem is that Tapu Koko equally relies on its terrain. It's special attack isn't actually super stellar. It's only 95. Now granted, physical Koko exists, and I actually wouldn't be shocked to see a lot of physical Koko from this team, but it's also generally this team is relatively physical, and you would probably want to be able to alternate a little freely. So one of the things is that with that Koko kind of wanting that electric terrain boost to get some necessary calcs, you have some anti-synergy there between the terrains. It's not the typical dual terrain team I see work the best are the electric psychic. Those tend to work pretty well together. And then obviously Weezing can set terrain as well, but which we'll get to the Weezing pick in a second. Blastoise is a nice support mon for tier 2. I wish that you had redirection so you could safely shell smash more often, but as a support mon, I think Blastoise fits this comp pretty well. Drifblim is hands down your best pick. In tier 3, that thing is super valuable, and paired with Rillaboom, it is super good, and paired with Koko, it's super good. It can proc weakness policies on both with Clear Smog, which is something I've done a lot of in the past. It's got a phenomenal support move pool that is really beneficial for both of them. Tailwind for the Rillaboom is really good. Having things like the Strength Sap and the Knockoff and all those sorts of all right, no, it doesn't get Knockoff this gen anymore. Having Will-O-Wisp and things like that for the Koko, super solid. I think that pick is what facilitates most of this team, which does mean that the team kind of suffers from some linearity. You grabbed a Alolan Marowak with no Trick Room setter, which is a little baffling to me. I'm not gonna lie. I don't know why you did that. Yes, you have Tailwind from Drifblim. I get that, but they're also both ghost types. So they share common weaknesses. So that's a little suspect, I think. You also, honestly, Alolan Marowak pairs so nice in this format with like strong flying types, which you don't have. And then and then Koko and Marowak are both weak to ground as well, which is an awesome. I like the budget hail mode. Aurora's Beartic is solid enough. I'm not a huge Beartic stan myself, but on this team where you have a couple different things that can set Geyser as well, I can see it working out either in Swift Swim or in Hail. For the price, it's pretty good. I've seen Aurora's pop off. Clawwitzer's another pick I really like on this team. Very good on terrain teams. Clawwitzer gets Terrain Pulse with the Mega Launcher, and it is very potent on a terrain team like this. It can really output a lot of damage for this team. And I think it's one of the better picks. The Weezing is the thing I don't understand. You're adding on another ground weakness that you definitely don't need. You have another, I believe, you add a steel weakness that's a little unnecessary. And then not only that, but it's like, what does it do? Your team wants all its abilities. Like, you're typically going to want Rillaboom Koko to set terrain. You're going to want Clawwitzer to have Mega Launcher. You're going to want Drifblim to have Unburden. You're going to want Beartic to have, Slush Rest or Swift Swim. The only mons that don't really need their abilities on this team are the Marowak and Blastoise. So I don't feel like that's giving you nearly as much counterplay as you want. I feel like in any situation where you want to cancel abilities, it probably hurts you just as much as the opponent. And then not only that, but like, you don't have a Trick Room setter on this team, and tier 3 has a ton of them. Like, grab a Reuniclus or something. Like, just anything to get Trick Room on this team, because I would really like it. The current best mode for this team is hands down lead Rillaboom Coco, set Tailwind, you either you turn out into your Marowak or you keep it in the back. Mon maxes, you either set a weakness policy and you late game clean up with either the Clawitzer or a Marowak. That's like the main mode this team is going to be have its bread and butter be, with a backup Hail, which I think that's good, but it's super linear. It's like it has like one thing it does that are facilitated by different Pokemon, which is why I think we were both a little lower on this team. Also, the speed tiers are just kind of awkward on this team. You have a base 130 Mon, and then everything else is in super mid speed, which is not great. That means you're going to get outsped under Tailwind. That means you're also going to get, by opposing Tailwind, you'll get outsped by a lot of these Mons. And then under Trick Room, I mean, you've got Marowak, and that's it. And Marowak's base 45, which isn't even that awesome for some of the harder TR teams in the division. What do you got, Wake?
Hey man, Shuckle's base 5, that's all I'm saying.
Yeah, I forgot about that. Because it's a real Pokemon.
Oh yeah. Yeah, so I guess my main thing with this team is like you said, like the anti-synergy between the Rillaboom and Coco. Like I get it with like Clawitzer, like, oh, I can have 3 different types of terrain pulse on this team, but like, do you really need that? Like in my experience, I don't think it ever needed that many types of terrain pulse. When I used it last season, I almost am like wondering if the like lightning rod on Marowak would actually get in the way with this team more than it would actually help.
You'd run Rockhead
like,
on this team most of the time, I feel, just
right,
so you don't so you don't take damage from the Flare Blitz. Or you could run Lightning Rod for Drifblim, I guess. I mean, you got 3 electric weak Mons, so it's not like bad to have the Lightning Rod, but also you're not like facilitating a super strong flying type. So
yeah. And the other thing to me is like the Blastoise pick. You didn't really touch on this. I don't love the Blastoise pick really either. I feel like
for your tier 2 slot.
Like, right. I think Blastoise, the great part, at least the part I like about Blastoise, is that on any given week it can be offensive, it can be like bulky support, it can kind of run hybrid sets a lot of the time. But on this team, like I don't see this really ever being like a super threatening like offensive piece.
Nope, it doesn't. It doesn't have the ability to shell smash like at all, really, because there's no redirector.
Right. Well, and you're also boosting its only 2 weaknesses.
Right. You're boosting grass and electric, which are in fact its weaknesses. And then not only that, but Yawn is one of the best moves you can tech on Blastoise, and electric terrain shuts down Yawn for yourself. So like, a lot of this team just boiled down to anti-synergy. But it's got some really powerful Mons. Like, folks, if you're not prepping hard for a Marowak Rillaboom Coco team, you're messing up. Like, those Mons can absolutely sweep you, especially with Drifblim support. Like, this team does necessitate quite a bit of prep. I know we've been relatively hard on the anti-synergy of it, but like the Mons in of themselves are very threatening. Especially like what I would call kind of the core of the team, which is the Rillaboom, Marrow, Coco, Clawitzer, Drifblim. I would consider that kind of the core of this team. Those Mons are very threatening when you see them all together. For sure. But yeah, that's kind of, I think, our finished thoughts. Anything else to add?
Yeah, I was also gonna say, like, I feel like with a team like this where you're taking double terrain, and this is more just like a suggestion for maybe something you could do with this. I'm not saying this like really affected my rating that much, but I would like to see, well, I personally think that, like, if you're going to have 2 terrain setters, right, like, let's say there's a week where you, for some reason, and it could happen, let's say there's a week where you really want to run Coco, but you don't necessarily want to overwrite grassy terrain. Like, maybe if there was a cool way to abuse telepathy, like, I guess you have, like, Marowak gets Earthquake, right?
What you do is that you run Earthquake Rillaboom with no terrain, and then run Telepathy Coco on the same week.
We solved the theme. But no, yeah, like you said, I don't think this team is bad, like, terrible at all. Like, you're going to have to prep for this team, otherwise, like, but yeah, I think the main thing is maybe try to find some tier fives that like actually do something.
That probably drop the Blastoise. See if you can get a. I would love a Trick Room setter on this team for the Marowak, and I think the speed tiers are also kind of all over the place. I mean, yeah, you have Coco and Rilla, which and pretty and like very consistent Tailwind, which is nice, but like your speed tiers are still a little scary. I would recommend something to kind of address those.
Yeah.
All right, next team. This one was weird. I'll let you start, Wake.
Yeah. All right. So this is the MK Mimikyus, coached by Yasha VGC. They were 6th pick, and this was the other one that we disagreed on, 10th versus 11th. But so this one has Tapu Fini, Sableye, Luxray, Como-O, Magmortar, Armaldo, Fletchinder, Bronzong, Tapu Bulu, Ice-Q, and Dugtrio. So I found it, I think Ryan would agree, I found it very, very difficult to like place this team.
Yes.
I honestly think that one of the big things I had against it was, and maybe Ryan doesn't agree with me, we haven't talked about this, but I don't love the Finny pick on this team.
I actually like the Finny.
Like, you
but
do?
We'll get
I don't
there.
know, because
Finny's one of the things on this team I
yeah,
actually think is correctly placed, but we'll get there.
yeah. I guess to me the weird part about it is like the it's like the speed tiers are not like bad, right? But they feel feels like a similar issue with last team where
I would say
120
the
and then
speed tiers on this team are bad. I would disagree. Actually,
yeah,
your fastest mon's base 85 because Dugtrio, other than Dugtrio has some gimmicky stuff. Don't get me wrong; it gets Bulldoze for like Magmortar and whatever else, and it has a couple like weakness policy procs it can do on this team, but like. You're not really prepping your mons to outspeed the base 120 Dugtrio most of the time.
right, yeah. I was trying to beat around the bush, but no, yeah. I guess like I like Bronzong normally in like a vacuum. I think it's a really really good TR setter. It's why it's one of the only ones in tier 2. But like I feel like it's not necessarily super needed here. Like the TR mode is like Armaldo.
Wow, we really
And like
disagree on this team. Interesting. Let's keep
really?
going. No, I like the
So maybe
Bronzong. Well, I guess we'll get there.
I don't know. To me, it feels like the Bronzong is not supporting enough. Like I wish there was something more threatening for the TR mode, I guess. Well, okay. I say that, but I was looking on my stats on my profile on Draft League NL, and the single mon I've lost the most Pokemon to is Armaldo for some reason. Uh, but yeah, I don't know. I feel like the Misty Terrain can get in the way of a lot of things on this team. Like Luxray can't get
I
guts
do
off.
agree with that. Yeah.
Sableye, I feel like one of the reasons you take Sableye over other prankster users, one of the reasons, is that it can do prankster Will-O-Wisp, which I think is like absurd. And with Misty Terrain, you might be getting in the way of that. Which I guess was the main reason I didn't like the Finny, but I guess like defensively it looks pretty good. What are your general thoughts on this one?
So I've seen teams like this before. Yasha, I think, has drafted before in the past, right? We on their resume they said they have. This
Yeah,
is
I think in VDL.
yeah. This is a very specific type of team archetype that I've seen. It's like a variation of bulky offense, essentially. These teams are a little bit more defensively oriented when I see them, and this team is definitely defensively oriented. You got your Firewater Grass core with the Finny, Magmortar, Bulu, which actually all work pretty well together. You've got Intimidate from the Luxray. Sableye obviously annoying. You got the Bronzong. Just some things I noticed. I think Sableye is the wrong Prankstermon on this team.
Yeah.
That's my big issue with it. So yes, can Sableye set free rain dance because you can't fake it out? Let's Armaldo get good. Okay, good. Problem is, our model is only base 45 speed. So even in rain, it doesn't necessarily outspeed your opponents, especially if they have tailwind support or faster mons than you or opposing weather even. So the problem is that the Sableye really only facilitates the Armaldo when this team would really prefer something with fake tiers. You would really prefer to have something like a Morgrim would be amazing on this comp. Works way better with Finny. Screens are super nice for this team. Fake tier support is ridiculous on this team when you look at things like the Finny, the McMortar. Those all can get hit really hard. Now, does Sableye do some other stuff? Yeah, it does. You mentioned Will-O-Wisp earlier. Assuming it actually lands, you can Will-O-Wisp your McMortar for Flashfire, which actually I don't think is an accuracy check. I think you can just Flashfire
Oh yeah,
McMortar for free.
yeah,
So you can
that's true.
flash fire your McMortar to get some boosts off with it. You can also flash fire a Luxray, let it run another item, probably something like, so that's cool. You've got two belly drum users on this team with the Komao and the Ice Skew, which is nice, like super sweet potential. You have a Shadow Sneak proc on Sableye. One of the things I like about this team is actually that it can support offensive Bronzong pretty well.
That
Between
is,
Quash
yeah.
support and the Shadow Sneak, I think that's all really good. My main issue with this team, though, is that yes, it has all those really, really cool procs, but I feel like the speed tiers are letting me down here a little bit. Fletchinder is not a mon that you can always bring in the lead slot. It is a little risky to lead with because Gale Wings, you want to keep it intact. Finny in of itself doesn't hit that hard initially, and that's really where a lot of my issue with the team comes in. If this thing had like a really good way to keep its bulk high, to lower the target's special defense or defense stats with Screech or anything like that. The problem is that Sableye doesn't get that. So this team ends up playing a very defensive sort of game, with some super sweepy potential, with a lot of mons that are very mid speed, and Quash can only do so much. And that's really where I'm at with it. I think it can perform pretty well. If Yasha plays this team well, it'll perform pretty exceptionally well. But the thing is that there is also a degree to which the amount of prep investment you have to do to get your team to work at all versus like the team simply having things that are really, really consistent is something I value highly. This team is not consistent on paper, but if you prep and play it super well consistently, it's actually one of the best teams here, um, potentially. But the problem is I think that potential is really hard to draw out of this team.
Agree. Yeah, I think like unlike the last team, I don't mind the double terrain here. Actually,
I actually like it.
yeah, yeah, I actually do like it because I mean, Finny, it's nice to have misty terrain, but Finny doesn't really care about it that much specifically, and sort of same. Well, Bulu cares about it grassy terrain less than Rillaboom does for sure.
Right.
Um,
And Grassy Terrain's nice to help Luxray and the McMortar. Oh, that's the other thing, type weaknesses. You got a lot of things that are potentially weak to ground, and then also Fairy isn't like bad per se. The main thing is you don't really have a great Fairy resist that isn't that Bronzong or Fletchinder if you're feeling like really risky, and Komao is one of your best offensive Pokemon, so it's a
right.
little scary.
Yeah, I would definitely want like a more consistent fairy switch in there. And yeah, I guess I was gonna get to the same point you got to about like the initial damage output is not that high. Um, like Luxray kind of has to wait if you're going like a guts offensive route has to wait a turn. Um,
Finny needs to
or
calm
requires
mind, yeah.
right, yeah, and like I mean, I guess you can do. I mean, he has weakness policy stuff with Fletchinder. Like he could do like pluck into like Komo-O or Tapu Bulu, I guess.
That's kind of
Um,
hilarious. I missed that. I was paying more attention to what Sableye can let proc.
right,
So like
yeah.
it
Well,
has a
no,
lot of
that just
stuff. And it's going to be hard for opponents to prep for everything. My main issue is that I think there are teams that, simply speaking, have more consistent modes than this one. And at the end of the day, like that's just it. I think the modes on some of the other teams are going to be more consistent that are placed above this one.
yeah, for sure.
All right. I think we're done. Moving along.
Yes.
Salty Suicunes. I think this is you.
Is this me?
I
I
think this
think I
is you.
did I think I started the last one.
All right, well, I'll start this one then. Salty Suicunes. We got Wolf's team. I actually really like this team. It's got some cool stuff. So we have the Togekiss, Scizor, Braviary, Swampert, Manectric, Mr. Mime Galar, which is one of my favorite mons. Cardio represent. Rapidash Galar, Incin, Lipard, Sceptile, Barbaracle. So one thing I love about this team, because I do want to start with the positives, this team is really good with both follow me support Togekiss and really good with offensive I'ma kill you Togekiss. The combination of the Mr. Mime Galar's Ice Shard with the weakness policy, Manectric Lightning Rod for it, and Lipard Fake Tear support means that you can very, very feasibly run this Togekiss very offensive. You can also run it more supportive. You can definitely run a more mixed Togekiss. I've done that in draft a few times. I don't always love it relative to kind of leaning one way or the other when I've used it in the past. The Incineroar here is interesting. As far as Incineroar comps go, I actually do think this is one I like it on a fair bit. The team's got some kind of frailer options that would kind of appreciate the Intimidate support. In addition to this team also does complement offensive Incineroar pretty well with the Togekiss. It helps handle those steel types that the Togekiss is afraid of. Most steel types are physical. Lowering their attack is really good, especially if the opponent's not running White Herb. And in tandem with the Lipard, doing Charm, Foul Plays, things like that, that'll be really nice. Braviary is pretty good on this comp. I don't really think Defiant's gonna end up coming up a whole lot for this team. It doesn't really have a lot of max moves that it's like weak to that'll proc the Defiant for you. But as a Tailwind setter, it's nice, and then it also does proc with Cardio, and it's got good, solid, physically offensive stats, which I like. Scizor is just great in max formats. I think people sleep on Scizor all the time. Yes, it's got a 4x fire weakness. It's pretty severe. I would have preferred to see this Scizor with something that is a little bit more like rain focused to kind of help get around that. But like, it's a very nice cleaner on this team. I really like the steel typing option available for this team. So why is this team here and not higher? Well, some of it is that immediacy problem that we had with Yasha's team, I think. It does have some things that are very immediately threatening, but this team does have a lot of things that it kind of wants to set up for that immediate threateningness, and I think the most immediately threatening option is Togekiss. So despite the fact that I think Support Kiss can work really well on this comp, I do think it's going to be the best offensive option most of the time, which is sort of a mixed bag, because Togekiss has a lot of type weaknesses. The Togekiss and Braviary also are both flying types that are very integral to this comp, and they share a type weakness, which is not great. The other thing is actually I'm a little worried about bulk in terms of the Togekiss is bulky, Incin's bulky, and Swampert is bulky, and Scizor is bulky, but there's an asterisk there. While those mons are while some of these mons are bulky, the Scizor and Swampert both have pretty debilitating 4x weaknesses. Manectric is made of paper, Sceptile is made of paper. I haven't mentioned Unburdened Sceptile with Mr. Mime Galar yet. That'll probably come sometime. But it's not that good. I've used it before. It's not that great.
Yeah.
But yeah, you've got all these mons where I'm like, oh, that probably wants Focus Sash. Or that really needs that berry to work. I hope the opponent doesn't have a nerve. There's a bit of that. I think that teching moves into this team is not going to be as challenging as the team allows for it defensively. It's also very Trick Room soft. The slowest mon on this team is base 60, which is the Incineroar. So if the opponent sets Trick Room against you, you're in kind of a bad spot because your Trick Room setter is Cardio. And while Cardio is awesome, you very rarely want to end up running Trick Room to stop opposing Trick Room on Mr. Mime Galar. I've done it before in the past. It can work, for one game, and that's it. I would highly recommend possibly addressing the Trick Room weakness. I think is the other big thing. In part too, while we didn't mention it in methodology, when it comes to ranking teams, we also looked at we kind of looked at overall. Like, for example, if there wasn't a lot of Trick Room this draft, then we probably wouldn't take Trick Room into as much consideration. but some of the top teams have really good Trick Room modes. So a Trick Room weakness therefore sticks out more than it might in a draft where very few people drafted it, if that makes sense, just for other coaches at home. So Wake, what do you got?
So my thing, like you said, kind of about the whole like 4 times weaknesses is like Swampert feels like a really important kind of like switch in on this team. Like
Mm-hmm.
it handles like Togekiss's weaknesses pretty well, actually very well.
Handles the
Um,
scissor weaknesses, yeah.
yeah, but like just the fact that like you said, everything's got or not everything, but to me like the two main switch-ins for Togekiss, which is like I think the main offensive piece on this team, not the only, but I think like the one that you're probably gonna want to be like or like that in prep to me draws the most attention. I've already kind of prepped for this team because he's my week 1, but like just having those 4 times weaknesses on like your key like defensive pivoting switching mons um makes me a little scared. The other thing is like I feel like the I don't like the ability for this team to like I guess you never mind, you literally said that already. Sorry, my brain is like half functioning right now, but
Too
I was
much
just
Lego
gonna say
Star
about the
Wars
immediacy thing.
does that to a
What?
man. Too much Lego Star Wars does that to a man.
No, being sick for like 5 4 days,
Nah, nah,
three
not
four
that.
days, whatever.
It's just your brain's rotting from video games. It's not about being sick.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's probably it.
yeah.
Um, I actually you didn't hit on the lie part at all. I do
I
like
love
the
the
lie part
Lipard.
here.
I love it.
Um, yeah, I think it's probably the best prankster mon for this team.
Yeah, I would
Or
agree.
at least one of the very suitable options. Like Fake Tears next to Togekiss sounds terrifying. Um, yeah, overall, I feel like if you call this team's like setup attempts correctly, the matchup for the Suicunes gets a lot harder because like
Yeah, I
because
the thing is similar to actually a little bit like Yasha's team, but not as severe. It doesn't really have like a mode per se. It's more like
mm,
but it supports itself pretty well. Like it independently supports its own team very well, which I like. I like it when teams like this support themselves well. It's a nice bulkier offense team, but like I said, part of the issue is that there's just a frailty issue. I mean, almost all the low tier mons are easily able to get KO'd outside of like maybe Mr. Mime. And then a couple of the mid tier, and then with Togekiss, Braviary sharing a type weakness, and then the two mons that are normally your kind of bulkier switch in mons, both having 4x weaknesses, does end up kind of dampering the team down a bit. But I think it's a very solid team. I would actually love playing with this team. This is the kind of team I would draft.
yeah, I think this team is pretty solid overall. I feel like it could maybe benefit from maybe getting rid of the I don't know, the tier 5s here feel kind of redundant, but like they're at least like they do something.
They're good tier 5s. I wouldn't switch those around.
Yeah. Yeah, I was gonna say I don't think they do a whole lot for the team specifically. Like I think their roles are kind of covered already, but like I don't think they're worth trading necessarily.
Yeah.
I don't know about you. This might be a weird take, but I almost don't love Braviary here that much.
I like it, but I also don't. I feel like I'd rather like a dragon type be in that slot. So you have like a Dragon Fairy Steel Core at the top. That also gives you some
Yeah,
nice. That would give you like kind of a nice electric resist, but uh, yeah. I mean, give you a nice electric resist, give you some neutralities to some things. But I actually, the Tailwind's super important for this team, though. I don't think it's a
right.
slot you can just like surrender. Tailwind Braviary with things like Scizor is absolutely terrifying. So I do think that and
Right, yeah.
actually Tailwind Incineroar is pretty terrifying too. So like it definitely needs to stay. But unless you can find something that performs as well as it does.
Yeah, I guess I was also just saying that because I remember he took very, very, very early. Like it was one of the first, like I think it was like round 3 or 4, and there were like a lot of others. But I think again, that's like not something you can fix now, really. But
Hmm.
um, yeah, yeah, I was also gonna address the trick room soft part, but again, my brain is not functioning right now.
All right, we will
Well,
move on then. SoCal Sylveons.
all right, I'll start this one. So the SoCal Sylveons, coached by Dinah, they were 11th pick, so pretty close to the
Dina.
wheel. Dina.
Yeah,
I swear I've heard someone say Dinah. Okay, Dina. My bad.
you're
Um,
good.
so they took Thunderous, uh, Mudhorse, Mudsdale. Gosh, dude. Mesprit, Obstagoon, Impidimp, Tyrantrum, Rapidash, Urshifu, Rapid, uh, Cofagrigus, Boltund, and Magneton. So one thing so the first thing that stands out to me about this team is electric. Well, it's got a lot of electric types. But other than that, I think the speed tiers and the speed control on both the fast end and the slow end are super good. Um, Cofagrigus is awesome. While she doesn't have Tailwind, she does have pretty good fast options to spread paralysis and or max airstream. I don't like the team probably wouldn't hate Tailwind, especially for something like Tyrantrum. But I don't think it like super needs the Tailwind either. Um, but other than that, I do really like I generally like the low tier picks here. I feel like she got really good value out of like her tier 5s and 4s. Even if they were kind of overlapping typings a little bit, I think a lot of teams had to do that because we nerfed tier 5's power level quite a bit. Um, but yeah, I feel like I was gonna say I don't know about this team's like modes per se, unless I'm missing something. There's not something that stands out to me as like, oh, they're gonna like lead this and blow me up, which is okay. Like that's not necessarily a problem, but I don't know. Am I missing anything there, Ryan?
Not particularly. It's actually kind of one of the reasons I was slightly lower on this team, is kind of due to that. I have two reasons for this team kind of being where it's at. Firstly, like you said, it's not defined super well. I know that Dina, for the record, just for folks that don't know, she's an incredible coach. You will
Yeah.
definitely have to prep your butt off, regardless of wherever you end up on PRs. Secondly, I know she kind of went out of her way to draft a bunch of stuff that she's never played with before. This is kind of an intentionally weird team. It's pretty similar to what I did in GLDL last season, where I just drafted a bunch of stuff that I had never really used before that I wanted to try out, get out of my comfort zone a bit. This is very much one of those kind of drafts. So like, I don't imagine that she's going to be too beat up when we talk about some of this stuff. The main thing is that there is a little lack of cohesion for the team. The Thunderous, you kind of want it to operate well as both a prankster and an attacking mon. But it definitely can on this team. The Mudsdale doesn't really have something to set it up with, I don't believe. I mean, you can like hit it with her Shifu, I guess, or like Energy Ball Mesprit, or I guess you can it gets own tempo, right? So you can like own tempo Swagger as well with the Impidimp. But the main thing but it doesn't really have like any of like the classic I'm a Mudsdale, I'm gonna stamina boost on you kind of options. So I like the Trick Room mode on this team relatively well. I think you have two setters in both the Mesprit and the Cofagrigus. It'll usually be the Cofagrigus. With Mudsdale offensive support's pretty nice. You probably would put like an Urshifu in the back with Sash to kind of help you clean up. I like Mesprit a lot on this team. It offers quite a bit of utility and some good offensive presence on the special side that this team needed. I'm going to be a little mean about the both Obstagoon and the Tyrantrum. So the reason I'm going to be mean about those is you already have an Urshifu that's very weak. and that kind of compounds a fairy weakness across, I think, semi-likely mons to show up, and you don't really have a fairy resist because Magneton is a Magneton. So not having that like resistance feels kind of bad, especially when those mons are a little frailer. The other thing is I love the value of the low tiers is there, but they're not the best supported. Tyrantrum has just like terrible speed. 71 is awful. It's got terrible defensive stats, especially on the special side, which you don't love in a Pokemon. And because of those two things, it really likes Tailwind. And while sure, you can paralyze stuff, that's a mon that would like Tailwind. I have kind of similar feelings on Obstagoon, a little less so though. I think Obstagoon's a little more self-sufficient with base 95, but also Obstagoon like only has base 90 attack. So like you kind of are relying on Defiant and Guts boosts to kind of get it going. I didn't really see a huge like weakness policy proc unless I missed something. So like, and it's got a 4x weakness to fighting, which that just kind of is what it is. I don't know. I don't feel like those. I feel like for if you're trying to use a bunch of like weird mons, I feel like some of the mode stuff could have been better for some of those. My favorite pick on the team is Bolton by a lot. I think Bolton's going to actually really facilitate a lot of this team. I think it's very good for what she's going for. I mean, this team's just kind of goofy. It's weird. We had a hard time placing. I believe it was 8 through like 6. I think it's 8 through 6 were the most contentious. Like we both kind of flip-flopped a lot. So this one ended up here just by virtue of being kind of strange. I do think it'll do pretty well though. It's got a nice mix of physical offense, special offense. The Trick Room mode's relatively fleshed out. Bolton support's going to be pretty good on this team. I'm interested to see Obstagoon and Tyrantrum in theory can do a lot. I think Rapidash is one of the better tier 5s we left around, and I'm excited to see Impidimp do some meme stuff. So that's kind of my thoughts.
Yeah, I don't have much more to say about this one. It's kind of goofy, but I'm sure it'll do well.
Yeah. All right. You're up, Wake.
Am I?
I don't know. I can't keep track of things. I just start talking.
I think we're both kind of tripping in different ways right now.
We are. The thing is,
actually,
I have no organizational skills, and then you're just like sick, so you can't like think straight. So this is a really coherent PR video.
I think I did talk about the last one, but let me talk about this one so that when we get to my team, you start it.
Sounds good, Chief.
All right. So the LSJE monsters were first pick overall, and they took Torkoal, Charizard, Lucario, Noivern, Lilligant, Morpeko, Mawile, Gastrodon, Hatterene, Malamar, and Trapinch. So the thing that stands out to me about this team is the blitz potential, and the like general modes are pretty strong. Like you have the Sun mode with Torkoal and then either Charizard or Lilligant. You have, I think Hatterene actually functions pretty well on this team. Gastrodon works all right under Trick Room, but Hatterene is to me one of those mons that like doesn't require a lot of like outside mons to like justify a slot, because it kind of does its own thing under Trick Room as well, offensively speaking. But obviously there's the Torkoal under Trick Room too. So I think the Trick Room mode is like not overextended, but also pretty good. And I like Noivern as a Tailwind setter. I think it's great, especially in max formats where you can, I think it's a viable max option too. Decent tier 5s. Trapinch is Trapinch, but it technically does like arena trap stuff, and I guess it's not terrible.
It's got some things. For a tier 5, it's pretty good.
Yeah, it does some stuff. But even then, like the Tailwind with stuff like Malamar and Lucario, I think is really great. Like I think having Tailwind to support those two mons is really good. I don't think there's a beat up on this team.
I checked. I won't say anything. I'll leave that ambiguous for now.
I'll say something.
Oh, okay.
I don't actually know which one gets beat up.
Okay.
I feel like something does, but yeah, okay. I'm actually not going to say anything about that either.
Okay.
That one is spicy enough that I'll leave it. Uh, but yeah, I think this team,
I will
I
say
like
for
the
me
cohesive.
that spiciness was in consideration when placing the team. Just so we're on the same page. One thing with
Um,
PRs is I have a lot of people who come up to me after they're done and they're like, "You didn't mention this, and this," and I'm usually like, "No, I knew all that. I just didn't want to reveal everything." Uh,
right. Yeah, I'm more so like I'll reveal it if I see it, but this one I'll leave this to be revealed during this season. Um, but yeah, I think I really like this team. I think it's really cohesive, and I think the all the individual parts work together pretty well. Um, like your Sun core is hybrid, fast and slow, so you can lead Sun, let Charizard blitz stuff down, it dies, and then maybe you're conservative with Torkoal, like with protects and maybe a resist berry and stuff like that. And then you get Hatterene in the back, and now all of a sudden you have speed control again. I really like how this team looks like it's going to flow chart really well to me. What are your thoughts, Ryan?
yeah, I really like this team quite a fair bit. This is a team I also even liked the more I looked at it, which doesn't always happen for me. So just some things. I love the trick remote on this team. I love having Hat with the Torkoal. I mean, just hattering, clicking things like Starfall and whatever, and then having a max HP Torkoal come out and like charcoal eruption your mons to death. I mean, it doesn't get much stronger than that. And then you toss on a
Yep.
Gastrodon, and it's like, okay, that's kind of nuts. After You Lilligant is also very good. Always look out for that. After You and Sleep Powder Lilligant is a massive threat. I think that Lilligant is generally underutilized in draft. I think this is a
Mm-hmm.
phenomenal team for it. It's probably one of my favorite Lilligant teams I've seen. The Zard in tier 2 is very good value. Lucario is a mon I'm a little suspect of on this team, even with some of the other things that we've mentioned. We're going to get to kind of my issues with the team, and Lucario is one of the things that compounds a few of them. I love Noivern in general. I don't necessarily know how I feel on this comp, but Frisk and Tailwind is very good, and Tailwind is nice to have. Frisk is good. I really actually do like Morpeko a fair bit. Electric types are good on Sun comps to have to help you handle water types. As far as low tier electric types go, I think Morpeko is one of the better options. And then you also have options like Parting Shot. It's got a pretty nice support move pool. Mawile's tier 5 Intimidate. I'm cannot be mad about that ever. I think Malamar is actually pretty solid. Superpower is pretty good on it. It's got nice bulk. I think Contrary is a very good draft ability. I don't really know if it takes the most advantage of Contrary compared to some other teams I've seen. There's not as many mons with things like charm and like you're not going to see as much like self charming and things like that. You might get a self parting shot from Morpeko if you're lucky. But most of the time it'll probably just superpower. And then Trapinch, like I said, fine tier 5. My main issues with this team, one is rock and ground coverage. And part of the reason the rock coverage in particular is notable is actually in that it can directly influence the damage output of some of the sun mode. So like Charizard without solar power is, I believe, only base. So it's base 109, which isn't a bad special attacking stat, but it's not like over the edge gonna destroy you. Really, the solar power is what puts that mon on the board as a massive threat. The fact that opponents can rockfall it as long as they can outspeed base 100 unless you get Tailwind support up is kind of scary, actually. If your opponent can tech something where they can get the weather control by just clicking max rockfall, that's kind of scary, and you got a couple mons that are weak to it too. Torkoal does not want to eat max rockfalls. Even if you tech berries and stuff, that's lowering the damage of moves like Eruption that are pretty good to tech on it. Noivern is also weak to rock. So part of the thing is that with your lead options, you're very weak to just like immediate Dynamax and then click the rockfall button, which is a little scary unless you don't lead Torkoal. But if you don't lead Torkoal, then your initial speed tiers are a little wonky outside of the Noivern. And then ground types are another thing. This team isn't like super ground weak per se. I mean, it has Torkoal, Morpeko, Lucario, Mawile, are the only ground weaknesses, but also a lot of this team is special, as in like almost all of it. So the problem is
Yeah.
that Max Quake is a very good move into this team. It has 2 immunities, which, yes, you have to work around those. Having 2 flying types that are immune to it is nice, but it also couples on the rock weakness for weather control. So you have this weird catch-22 where it's like the ground coverage lowers the damage output of the sun mode, and then the sun mode and the tailwind mode aren't as safe because there is that ground coverage that can come out. So the physical attackers on this team being only limited really to the Lucario, Malamar, and Morpeko does not feel the best. So those were the issues I had with this team. That's kind of what kept it down, was that in my mind I was like, the thing with weather modes and flowcharting is I'm really big on consistency. And part of my issue is that this team is like pretty consistent, but it's not like rock solid. Opposing Prankster is really bad for this team. If you've got something with Prankster Rain Dance, like, dude, that is really strong into this team. If you got like Prankster Rain Dance and then like Fake Out, like, that's very strong into a lot of this team. The other thing is that Hat actually doesn't have a redirector, which I normally wouldn't mind, but with how strong this Trick Room mode is, I would love to see some way to make sure Hat can actually set that Trick Room safely, since it is the only thing that can set the Trick Room, unless Malamar gets Trick Room and I'm tripping, which I might be. So those are kind of my thoughts on it. I overall really like this team. I actually waffled on where to put it. I even at one point considered it potentially being top 5. But ultimately, I think some of those defensive weaknesses, some potential mode inconsistency that we'll have to kind of see play out, is really what held it back. It's also a team where you know what's going to happen. While it can do a lot of different things, while it can operate in Trick Room, it can operate in Tailwind, it can operate in this or whatever, at the end of the day, by the end of game 1, you're pretty much going to know what the 6 Pokemon do, which I think gives you a better advantage for games 2 and 3 than some teams that are a little down the line.
Yeah, for sure. I will say Malamar does get Trick Room.
Okay, that is good to know. Thanks for researching that. All right, so that critique is invalid. I'm sure I looked that up when I was rating the team, by the way. I usually do. I just forget by the time PRs roll around. In this case, it took a while, so...
Yeah. All right. Yeah, I'm good. I'm good with that. If you're good with this one.
Yep, I am ready. So we got the San Diego Sanacondas. And
it was definitely your turn this time.
Yes, it is. My brain is working correctly. So this team has Spectrier, Zapdos Galar, Gothitelle, Registeel, Wishiwashi, Archeops, Garbodor, Grimmsnarl, Sanaconda, Rotom-Mow, and Centiskorch. So the thing with this team is that, I'm gonna be honest, it has some of the best value of any team. Spectrier is a phenomenal tier 1 Pokemon. Galarian Zapdos, I think, is hands down one of the best tier 2s. Gothitelle is one of the best tier 3s, along with Registeel. I think that's pretty solid. I think Sanaconda is great for its tier. Wishiwashi and Archeops are great for their tier. Garbodor is a great tier 5 option. Rotom-Mow is a really good tier 3 electric type. And Centiskorch is great. So, like, one thing I really got to compliment Joey on, just pure value picks across the board, man. Like, that is huge respect from me. And the Grimmsnarl, of course, is awesome. The thing that this team runs into is that it doesn't really... this team rates pretty highly because the mons in of themselves are good, and there is some nice synergies, right? Like, you got the Archeops with the Tailwind, you got the Gothitelle with the Trick Room. The Trick Room mode's actually pretty good with the Registeel and the Sanaconda. Your fast mode looks pretty really scary with Spectrier, Zapdos. Like, that is a lot of offense. Most moves you want to hit Spectrier with will boost the Zapdos with Defiant, which is terrifying. Gothitelle's nice for trapping as well, especially on a team like this. Grimmsnarl is just insanely good support for this team. It does suffer a little bit from having some frailer Pokemon, or some Pokemon that want to be out of certain HP ranges. So being able to click things like Reflect and Light Screen are super, super good on this kind of a comp, along with some of the other support moves are very, very strong. Like, Fake Tears Grimmsnarl and Spectrier hits Max Phantasm is just an OHKO on literally anything in the game. There's not much you can do about it. Sanaconda is pretty good. I've seen some good usage from it. Rotom's great. The main thing with this team, and the reason it ended up at 6th, is that it is a collection of a lot of really, really great mons that I love, but like it doesn't really have like a mode. Like there's no weakness policy procs on this team. The Tailwind mode is definitely there and good, but it's also relying on Archeops. Which I think Archeops is a little inconsistent. It's one of the best tier 4s, don't get me wrong, but like I don't think it's any more consistent than, I don't think it's as consistent as some of the tier 3 Tailwind setters relative to it. And then you obviously like an Airstream boost with Zapdos. And then you have the Trick Room mode, which I think is solid, but it's like overall kind of physical. And just generally what I run into with this team is that, like, when I look at it, I'm like, I really like where a lot of these things are. I like a lot of the picks, but like I don't necessarily see, like, outside of like the top 3 mons, which are stupid, outside of like Spectrier, Galarian, Zapdos, Grimmsnarl, I don't 100% know what all comes every week, and I'm not 100% sure that people aren't going to find ways to prep around some of that stuff, especially as the season goes on. So I think it's a very solid team. The Trick Room is very physical. That's what I meant to say earlier. I think it's a very solid team. It's got some really good stuff on it. It does lack a little in coverage on the special side of things. So I don't believe Spectrier needs very good coverage. You can pretty much just run like Max Phantasm and it'll kill everything anyway. But like, you don't really have like, there are some teams with some weaknesses to things like good Max Rock, good ice moves, good those kind of attacks, and you don't have a lot of those coming out from the Spectrier and the Rotom. So you might actually run into occasionally getting a little stop-gapped by that sort of thing. So what do you think, Wake?
Yeah, I agree on pretty much all of your points on this one. I think like you said, I think the top 3, like Spectre, Gyarados, and Grimmsnarl, are like really good together. But I'm not sure about like Gothitelle. I'm not sure is the best option here. Like it looks like this team probably isn't setting Trick Room very often with it, but like I'm not sure exactly what it wants to be doing on this team. Like I guess trapping on a
Helping
team
hand,
this,
trapping, yeah, that kind of
yeah,
stuff.
yeah, which I think is good. Like it's definitely not bad. I do like Gothitelle better when it's doing like a variety of things because I think that's one of the things that makes it so good. But I guess it's okay. Um, yeah, I guess my major thing is the lack of modes, like you said. Like I feel like this team is going to be like it's so much. You're very much able to prep for individual mons on this team versus like, okay, what do I do versus like, I mean, obviously like within like realistic boundaries here, but like you don't have to think as much about this about when you're prepping against this team. Like, oh, what does this mon plus this mon do to me? Like, it feels like, and maybe that's an oversimplification, but it does feel like it's going to be kind of easier to
I think the way
just be
this,
like, oh,
I think what you're trying to get at here is that like the team has a lot of offense, but the counterplay isn't initially evident, right? Like my thing is I look at this team and I'm like, okay, how does this team stop like Prankster? How does this team stop this? How does this team stop like a brick breaking the screens? And the answer is I don't know. Right?
right.
Do you kind of feel where I'm coming from there? I feel like a lot of
Yeah,
other
yeah.
teams, the
That's part
modes,
of what I'm getting at.
yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And it's like the counterplay that you do bring against this team is like it's yeah, like, well, it's evident. It's very easy to know what to bring, and to a certain extent that makes it like, oh, I know they're going to bring bird break, so I can. But then it's like, well, I mean, it's like, what are you doing about that too, like you said? And yeah, my words are still not really working, but that's about all I have to say about this one.
Yeah, I do think this is a very good team. I know I think this
Yeah,
is Joey's first time doing draft. And I wish them a lot of luck. This is a very, very nice team to have for your first go around. It's got a lot of tools, it's got a lot of really great mods. It's got some very solid utility players, nice Tailwind, nice Trick Room. I mean, it's just a lot of the things you look for in like core drafts. I just think that with some of the teams that are above this one, there's just a little bit higher level of consistency with a little bit better definition to what every mon does. At least based on our impressions. Okay.
Yeah, for sure.
Number 5.
Right.
It's
So
all
next
you.
up is fifth place, and we have the Perth Sentis Scorchers. They're coached by Jaden, and they were 9th pick. They took Garchomp, Primarina, Dusknoir, Tangela, Hitmonchan, Swoobat, Lopunny, Metagross, Entei, Skuntank, and Maractus. So the I think the standout part of this team is the fantasy core is like I believe they
Nuts.
were Jaden's first. Yeah, they were Jaden's first 3 picks, and I think they complement each other pretty well in terms of like, I mean, they're all just going to deal a lot of damage and stuff. I don't. My issue like right away with it comes with like lack of speed control. Like this team basically has no speed control. I mean, other than like Bulldoze Entei, and like, yeah, that's pretty much it. I do know that he.
Yeah.
What was that?
Well, in the Dusknoir. We'll get into that. There's some cool stuff on this team that the Dusknoir allows
Right.
for.
Yeah. I was gonna say like I know that Dusknoir can set Trick Room, but does this team really want to be under Trick Room that much? I mean, like I know Primarina is one of those mons that can kind of function under Tailwind or Trick Room, but I think it's best served when you have both of those options. I do know, in all fairness, he did think that Swoobat got Tailwind, but it is a transfer move. So I am confident he will trade to fix that. But I guess I guess this is another one where well, no, not really. Never mind. I was gonna say there's no modes, and then I realized there are like a lot of modes.
Yeah, there are a lot of modes. Yeah.
I like I like the ability for this team to like lead. While it doesn't have like a lot of role diversity, really, I think
No.
it does have a lot of like as in role diversity within each individual mon. They all kind of do one thing more or less. I think that within that boundary, I think it's okay for this team because it has things that enable consistency, like solid redirection in Tangela, like a decently fast fake out and an inner focus fake out. 2 inner focus mons actually. I think inner focus is great. I do. Yeah, again, really, my main thing is like this team is gonna like punch holes in like a lot of matchups. It's just again that lack of tailwind is really like my major thing keeping this team down. But I do know he plans to fix that. But what are your thoughts on this one, Ryan?
Yeah, so this team's interesting. It's got some elements to it that I really, really love, and then some things that I'm not as sold on. So Metagross. Metagross is one of the only tier zeros, that we had this go around. I feel like this team doesn't necessarily at the moment justify spending those points on the Metagross. Metagross is a mon that typically is going to need Tailwind support, which we've touched on, but also like you want to make sure too that you have a consistent proc for weakness policy Metagross with the Entei with Bulldoze, and you also have coaching Hitmonchan for it. But like neither of those things I think super addresses the speed of the mon as well as you want to. I found that Metagross is actually a mon that I typically prep for by just like pressing foul play into it. And that there's not as much counterplay to that without some of that extra speed control, which is a little concerning. The Garchomp is very good with that 102 speed. That's pretty nice. I like Lopunny here a lot to facilitate the Primarina. Having Fake Tear support for Prim is very, very good. Kind of needed a little too. Prim's physical defenses aren't always the best. And the thing is that to me, the Dusknoir, I actually feel like a Trick Room mode with like Dusknoir, Primarina, Metagross might actually be shockingly viable. Especially just with the fact that you can Shadow Sneak your Metagross and Trick Room and Prim has base 60 speed, but you can slap Iron Ball on that pretty easily, and you can kind of get away with it. Entei's amazing on this comp. I actually think Entei is my favorite piece of this comp. It's very good offensively in of itself, especially with the Tangela. You can like click Max Flare, and then you have a Chlorophyll boosted Tangela. That's very nice. And I generally I like a lot of what this team has going on. I think the big thing is that there's a lack of that speed control. It's a little Trick Room soft in of itself. While Lopunny is fast, it's also a tier 5, and it's only base 105, so it is outsped by a lot of things. So you kind of run into this issue where like some of the top things on that speed tier chart are the Lopunny and the Swoobat. And then you kind of hit Garchomp Entei, which are base, pretty respectable, base 102, base 100, but there are a lot of teams that have a lot of mons that are much faster than that. And I don't necessarily think that a ton of teams are really going to need to bother outspeeding Lopunny with good prep, which allows you to kind of bulk out in this team a little bit. And I think that's kind of a concern for it. I think Skuntank is fine here. It's kind of an underexplored mon in my opinion. I don't see it get a ton of use, but in theory it's pretty nice. And then Maractus, I'll be honest, I'm not 100% sure what Maractus is doing here. You don't have any mons that are water weak other than the Entei, and like that's basically all Maractus does. It's not very good outside of that role, but it's good value, I guess. But so that's kind of the thing. I think the team it needs a little bit more speed control, and I think that while it does definitely have those defined modes, it's kind of using them in a way I haven't seen before, and that makes me hesitant. If you're going to have something like a Primarina, I'm like, okay, cool. We have like a nice redirector for it with the Tangela, but you can also tech around that with safety goggles. And then you have the Lopunny, which is a tier 5. So like Hitmonchan's a tier 4. Like a lot of the things that are supporting a lot of these top mons are things that are inconsistent in of themselves to a degree, except for that Entei, which I think really carries a lot of this team. So I rate this team pretty highly. I think it's quite good. I also do worry slightly about Max Quake and Entei, Skuntank, and then Primarina as well, because frankly, I would click Max Quake into a Primarina just to keep living hits. It's relatively safe, and then that is what it is. So that's why this team ended up here. We kind of tossed around putting it lower and higher as well, but this is ultimately, I think, where we settled. I think with a couple tiny changes, this team though does skyrocket quite a bit.
Yeah, I think just adding a Tailwind setter makes this team way better.
Yeah, we do need to rate the teams as we have them right now instead of what they're going to be in the future. So I rated this team without the Tailwind setter being taken into consideration for the future. Okay, moving on.
Although I will be sad to see Swoobat leave. I would like to see the Shadow Sneak to get +4.
Yeah, off your base what? One what's isn't Duskmar's attack's pretty good. Yeah, base 100. Yeah.
Oh yeah, and Swoobat's only base 77.
Yeah, so
which I guess
that 50% Swoobat sweep is coming hot. Yeah. All right, number 4. This is your team. So, your team's pretty good. I like it overall. I have a couple issues, but we'll get there. So we got Cinderace. Wake pick Cinderace. It's a meme. Fuck you.
Is it a meme?
Yeah, a little bit. Fuck you. Rotomosh is very good on this team, but we'll get there. Aromatisse, Guzzlord, Purloin, Berserker, Throw, Vino, Ninetales, Drizzly, I think is how you pronounce it. I don't remember. Tauros.
I always said Drizzile.
Drizzile? Okay. That's fine. I think it should go, but we'll get there. So, this team, I actually really like this team. It has a really, really, really strong Sun Core. The combination of the Sun mode being the Ninetales, Venu, Cinderace is super nice. Now, Cinderace is interesting because you're kind of like, okay, you have 2 fire types, but Cinderace does switch types a lot, and in Sun, Gmax Fireball is like a thermonuclear bomb, and it doesn't really matter. The Rotom gives you some really nice defensive synergy with this comp. I'm not 100, like, I think it's an amazing defensive piece for this team. It gives you that max Quake immunity that this team kind of desperately needs, which actually is an issue I have with this team, is that it's pretty weak to max Quake. Which I guess is just a recurring trend today. The Aromatisse with the Guzzlord feels pretty good. That gives you kind of a trick room mode. I do think Guzzlord's inconsistent in how often it can be brought, but it can be very, very good.
Yeah,
Berserker's
I will say that there were other dragon types in the same tier that I knew were like probably on paper better, but I kind of just wanted to use Guzzlord.
fair
Like I
enough.
think
It's
Dragalge and
yeah,
I think
Dragalge is
Dragalge
like
and Drampa
objectively
were both on
better.
my radar.
I would say like Drampa would have been the best pick there, but that's okay. Uh,
Yeah, I they probably would have been, but
uh, it's all right. Berserker's actually surprisingly good on this team. Not only is it a solid trick room option in of itself, it actually pairs really nicely with Cinderace. Steely Spirit is kind of broken. Purloin is one of the best value picks in tier 4. Getting tier 4 prankster is super nice. It gives you a lot of counterplay to a lot of teams with a pretty low tier slot, which is super good. Tauros is one of the better mons that was available in its tier. That gives you nice intimidate support. Also, sheer force. Tauros is a pretty okay cleaner. I don't really think it'll be used in that role too often. Throw is a solid tier 5 fighting type. It can do some stuff. Not a lot of stuff, but it has 100 attack, so like it's pretty good. It's good under Trick Room, and it can do some damage and whatever else. And coaching boost or whatever else you want. Drizzile, it's fast. I checked its move pool. It's got pretty good. It's got a pretty nice support move pool. I just don't see it coming very often. I don't think it adds a lot to the team. That you couldn't get from something else perhaps, but for what it is, it's got soak, it's got icy wind and some other stuff, so it's aight. The main reason this team ended up getting number 4 is that it has a nice mode, and then it has 2 nice modes. It's got a nice tricker mode, it's got a nice weather mode, and the offensive pieces make really good sense together. They're very cohesive and pretty strong. I do think my critiques of this team, I mentioned Max Quake earlier, a little bit of a concern still. You've got a lot of special attackers. Another issue I have is actually that your team kind of needs to max to get the most out of its damage output. What I mean by that is that the 2 main max options on this team are going to be Cinderace and Venusaur. And Cinderace, without the Pyro Ball boost and the extra bulk it gets from Dynamax, can be a little underwhelming. And then the same issue exists for Venu. Venu really wants that Gmax Frenzy to go off to really get the most of its damage. I really worry about opposing weather into your team. Seems pretty strong. If you end up leaning weather, if you shut that down, that's pretty good. Also, really fast Tailwind is super bad for this team. You also didn't give yourself any real Intimidate deterrent. So a lot of the team is pretty physical. You have some special attackers, obviously. 3/4 of your Sun Core is those special attackers. But then, like, outside of that, the Berserker, the Throw, the Cinderace, -1 Cinderace just like does not get calcs, especially if your opponent can also shut down the weather on you. And all those things kind of add up to where I'm like, okay, like, the team is very, very good. It should flowchart well most of the time, but you are definitely going to have some very troublesome matchups where the counterplay for your opponent's very obvious and difficult for you to stop with the tools you have. But overall, I think it's a very good team. It's got a lot of things going for it. It's very well. It's very like overall pretty solid defensively, pretty solid offensively. It's got a nice mix of different types of attackers, different kinds of roles. And while not all the mons are like super versatile, there's enough versatility here to where you do have to play a little bit of some mind games.
Yeah, I'll just say a couple things about it. I won't talk as much as the other ones, but I think that the 2 main points, things that I maybe should have prioritized more, were Tailwind Setter and Intimidate Deterrent. Like, I don't think my team is going to be like super crazy weak to Intimidate,
No.
but like, I have Incineroar week 1, and it's proving to be a little bit of a problem, but more so because it cripples Cinderace and kills Venu. But
that'll put a damper on the spirits.
Yeah, I guess to kind of what was it? Yeah, Tauros was kind of like, oh, there's some stuff there's not much available. That was my last round pick, but I figured it'd be a decent like non-max like damage dealer. Um, I also think Rotom Wash actually helps me, and because I think there's a rain team in this division and there's another sun team, and I think those are the only like big weather teams. There's a couple small hail modes.
Yeah, there's some hail modes
Um,
kind of floating about. There's no sand though, which I'm pretty surprised by.
yeah, well, I think no sand
Well,
helps me out a little
Sanaconda, I
bit.
guess, in theory.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
like, come
but
on.
I did right. I did actually like I looked after the fact, and Rotom Wash actually does fairly well into most of the other weather cores, which kind of worked out nicely for me.
Yeah.
In terms of like it's gonna take like rain, like water moves in rain, and then deal electric moves and stuff like that. But yeah, I was really happy with this team. There's a couple things like Tauros and Guzzlord that I'm just kind of excited to use. Um, but like also obviously some comfort picks like Cinderace and my also the first draft I ever did was a Venu Ninetales Azumarill team. So I kind of harkened back to the good old days, I guess. Back when back when I could make finals in the league.
All right, let's go ahead and move on to
Right.
the next slide. Okay, our third place team is the Traverse City Torteras, coached by Raz. This team slaps. So I will let you talk about it though. To
All
start,
right.
I have a lot to say
All
though.
right.
I like this team.
Yeah, I also like this team. So Raz was second pick here, and he took Whimsicott, Duraludon, Jellicent, Crocodile, Togepi, Persian, Flareon, Glastrier, Behem. Behem or Behem? I've never known how to say
I
that
say
one. But
Behem. I think that's technically correct.
I think I
Someone will
usually
correct
say
us.
Behem, but I didn't this time. Uh, Vikavolt and Dunsparce.
Man, you didn't even
So,
blink when you said Vikavolt instead of Vikavolt, and I'm like, damn, all right, I guess we're just gonna.
well, the weird thing is, I think I normally say Vikavolt,
Huh.
which,
All right.
dude, I am not me right now. Anyway, so I love this team. I think this team is like, okay. So well, I'll start off with it has a very good, fast like Tailwind mode, with Whimsicott plus Duraludon or Whimsicott plus Crocodile or even stuff like Flareon can work okay under Tailwind. Um, you could scarf Ice Horse under Tailwind. I wouldn't recommend it, but I also wouldn't mind seeing it. Um, okay. Um,
Scarf? You don't need
scarf
scarf,
Ice
but
Horse,
okay, just keep going.
scarf Ice Horse under Tailwind, dude. I'm just saying.
Oh my god.
um, but no, I think one of the things that's actually going to make this team like excel in like comparison to the other teams is the Trick Room mode. I mean, obviously Glastrier is going to make any Trick Room mode really solid, but he also got Jellicent, which I think is a fantastic Trick Room setter, as well as Behem, which is technically also a Trick Room setter, but can also function more as like an offensive piece under Trick Room, as well as Vikavolt, which is also a very, very threatening offensive Trick Room piece. So I think that the Trick Room mode here is going to be like in some of these matchups, it's just going to kind of win, like at least on paper, like this Trick Room. Like if I'm looking at the other teams ahead of it, like this might be the best Trick Room mode in the league
I think it
in
is.
this division.
It's part of the reason why I
I
rated
think,
this team so highly. There's so many teams that are Trick Room soft in this division, and this team is the one that you got to prep for that side of things.
yeah, I think the other notable Trick Room mode outside of this one is like the LSJE monsters.
Yeah,
With like
I'd agree.
Hatterene,
Hattering
Gastrodon,
Torkoal, yeah.
Torkoal.
Hattering Torkoal, Gastrodon, yeah.
Yeah, but so this team's Trick Room core is like fantastic. The fast speed control options are also obviously there with Whimsicott and Persian. I do wish there was maybe one Mon that was like naturally fast damage dealer, which I think it's okay that it doesn't have that, but I also think that like your mid speedy Mons which again, you have one of the best tailwind setters in the format with Whimsicott, so it's gonna work. It'll work out in most matchups, but I am slightly worried about matchups where potentially that tailwind does not go off, and then it's like, well, my like Duraludon and Crocodile are like just kind of like useless. Um, but you know, he has stuff like Togepi next to Jellicent is going to be basically guaranteed Trick Room. Even if you have to lead like Togepi next to Whimsicott, I mean, it's probably not ideal, but that's going to be pretty consistent. That's going to be like guaranteed Tailwind basically. Um, so I like this team, yeah, a lot. I mean, I think really the only thing I would change about it is maybe adding like one naturally fast Mon. But what do you think?
Yeah, I actually agree with a lot of your points. I think the thing I really like about this team is just that it all kind of so like a lot of Glastrier teams I see are protect the king kind of teams, right? You like
Yeah,
have Glastrier and then you build your entire team around making sure Glastrier just goes off without a hitch. This is not one of those teams, which I find really interesting. This team actually has it allows for more traditional counterplay to horse than a lot of other teams might. This team allows for it to get burned. You can set screens in front of this team. It's not getting. It's not having a weakness policy proc really. I think there is one or two potential procs, but they're both all pretty damaging. Like a lot of the things that I see on a lot of Glastrier teams where it's like you set the trick room and then like you have redirection and then you like really good redirection, like top tier redirection, not Togepi, which is good redirection, don't get me wrong, especially for tier 4. But like a lot of these kind of teams you see focus around the Glastrier. This is a team that has focuses around the Whimsicott, which I think is really interesting. The Tailwind and Fake Tier support that this Whimsicott gives is massive for this team. The ability to allow the Duraludon to go off, Duraludon ignoring that redirection is pretty nice for a couple different teams. It's got a good offensive typing for a lot of stuff. The fact, too, that like Whimsicott, like things like the Jellicent and the Vikavolt and the Behem, I mean, if you get those things under Tailwind, they outspeed natural base 130s, which is like really crazy. Like if Raz gets speed control and he decides to run his team fast for a week, you will get mowed over. I mean, Vikavolt has 145 special attack stat. Jellicent clicking like max clicking water spout or just max geysers with prankster support's really good. That's the other thing I like about the Whimsicott here is it also operates in that trick room mode. Trick room set, it's like, okay, cool, Whimsicott is still useful. You can still encore stuff, you can still charm stuff, you can still like you can still fake tier stuff for the Behem and the Vikavolt, which I think is great. I think that the team makes a lot of sense together offensively, defensively. My main issue with the team is actually that it relies too heavily on its speed control. If this team does not get up Tailwind, if this team does not get up Trick Room, it is significantly easier to handle. The team doesn't really have the necessary bulk in a lot of respects. The thing that mostly helps you with that is the Crocodile. Crocodile kind of acts as a glue piece for this team so that it's not like solely speed control go, but this team is very speed control go. So like if your opponent has a good way around that speed control, if they can find that flowchart that just works, this team does not have a lot in retaliation to that. But I don't actually think a lot of teams are going to have an easy time doing that, which is why I rate this team so highly. But I do think it has an over reliance on speed control. I do agree with you that something also naturally fast that just hits hard other than the Crocodile would be nice. Persian and Whimsicott are both really nice fast support mons, and I particularly like the Persian and Togepi on this team, I should add. But the reliance on that speed control to get everything kind of going is a little scary. So that would be my biggest like critique of the team. But man, other than that, I mean, if this thing gets trick room going, a trick room sweep going with Glastrier or Vikavolt or whatever, or it just tailwinds and just decides to blitz you, there's just so little counterplay. It's really ridiculous if it can get going. As for some other stuff, I mean, I think I mentioned every mon on the team, but I'll toss in Behem's one of the best mons in the tier. It's got a ridiculously good attacking stat with 125, and it also gets like stuff like Meteor Beam, which is just nutty. And then you combine that with Vikavolt, it's like, just my god, so much damage output coming from that. And then I like the Flareon and the Dunsparce. Flareon for a tier 5 is pretty good here. Toxicorp Flareon as a max option, especially because the team doesn't have as many physical beaters in Trick Room, is nice. And then Dunsparce is one of Raz's favorite Pokemon, and it can do some hacksy bullshit. So,
dude, I want to say Dunsparce isn't a real Pokemon, but I've literally seen Raz win a set because of it. So
it's real. It's just like not as real as everything else on the team. It's more real than Shuckle.
It's more real than Shuckle, yeah, or Magikarp. But yeah, for sure. I think that the team, I don't know. Part of me was like, it could maybe get rid of Persian, but it's the only fake out, so you probably want to keep.
You need to keep the Persian. Persian does a lot on this comp.
Yeah, I guess that was my thing. Like, I was suggesting you maybe drop something for like a fast, something naturally fast.
It feels like almost every piece is essential, though. I feel like this team kind of needs 2 Trick Room setters. It's weird because I know that Raz likes the Duraludon. I've talked with him about his team. I do actually think that if you had to go for another fast offensive mon, you actually probably drop Duraludon, but I know that's not going to happen.
Yeah, you could get something fast that still benefits from like the fake tier support that is maybe faster than Duraludon naturally.
Yeah,
that could be something, but I don't think it needs to happen. I just think it might possibly help.
We'll see. I think this team's super solid.
Yeah, for sure.
Great job to Raz on this one. All right.
Yes, sir.
Second, yeah. So this team, fuck Hunter, Tapu Lele, Raichu, Ludicolo, Thievul, Sock, Stoutland, Sudowoodo, Celesteela, Pelipper, Duosion, Wishcash. Okay. This team's kind of dumb. If you saw GLDL last season at all, this is very similar to, or even MDL, the season where Matt had his championship team. You'll notice that there are a lot of pieces that are very similar to that one on here with some added additions. Hunter had a lot of success last season using Sock with Dragapult, just like inner focus coaching on Sock into Dragapult. He is making a return, doing it with Celesteela here. Raichu Steela is very good in Series 9 draft. That's just kind of a fact. You have to prep for that. Steela's insane in Rain too. Steela has 2 weaknesses. It's fire and electric. He has lightning rod, and then he has a rain mode, so he doesn't get hurt as bad from the fire types. His rain mode's very good. Pelipper operates both as a tailwind setter for the team and also to facilitate the Ludicolo. And he can do some nonsense with that. Weakness policy Ludicolo with Pelipper is not a joke. Tapu Lele is actually the most interesting pick on the team, the Tapu Lele Thievul, but I actually really like it. Psychic Terrain helps handle some of the things that I think might naturally attempt to go into this team. I think the Lele Thievul is actually a pretty nice pairing of mons that can work pretty well together. Stoutland had a fantastic performance last season in GLDL. It doesn't have a sand mode this go, to support it, but it does, generally speaking, for a tier 4 normal type beater, it does the job well. Sudowoodo for a little bit of some Trick Room support is nice. Duosion is a surprisingly good Trick Room setter. It's actually got a pretty good special attacking stat as well. Slap an Eviolite on it, it'll get the job done pretty well.
125?
Yeah.
Wow.
I don't think it's 125. But it's high. It might not be.
I'm going to check. It says that on the spreadsheet, but I feel like that might not be right.
I will check.
Anyway, continue.
Anyway, Wishcash is a mon that I generally think is kind of bad, but I'm excited to see Hunter use it. The main, generally speaking, though, this team, it's just really strong. It's a Steela built team. Steela first team. You have to break the Steela, and then while attempting to break the Steela, you also have to prep for Lele not just auto sweeping you. You have to prep for his insanely budget, really strong weather mode. He's got some nice support pieces built around it. The team's slightly Trick Room soft, but it also has a Celesteela, which is base 60 and is hard to kill with everything else around it. So being a little Trick Room soft isn't going to be that big a deal for it. And it's just very strong. This team is kind of like The most interesting thing on it is definitely the Lele Evil. I'm super pumped for that. But in general, I mean, this team just makes sense. Like, people have seen this kind of team archetype in draft before. There's a reason it works. I mean, it's one most I've seen this sort of a Steela comp win 2 or 3 leagues now. It just is consistent. It works. He did a very nice job building it. He did all his picks in the correct order, in my opinion, and it's super strong. And I do think it does have some individual flavor that I'm pretty excited to see. What's the word on
Yeah,
devotion?
it does actually have base 125 special
That's
attack.
hilarious. All right,
Wait,
so
does
that
it get
little
expanding
devotion,
force?
I really want to see him sweep with a
It
max
gets
Eviolite.
expanding force, dude.
Yeah, it does. And you combine that with Eviolite, dude, that thing's gonna be
Oh
sick.
man, dude, that's actually awesome. I
Yeah.
did not realize it was that strong.
Yeah, so that
Um,
watch out for the watch out for the single-celled organism. It will kill your team, guys. Uh but yeah, no,
um,
this
yeah,
team's very solid. It's got
for
so much
sure.
good stuff, and it has some other techs and things, but most people pretty much know what this is going to look like.
Yeah. I was gonna say, yeah, like it is almost kind of like a season one All Star team. Like it's got a lot of like very high performing mons from season one in here. Stoutland was I think didn't Emboss beat Hunter in finals with Stoutland.
Yeah,
I guess he decided if you can't beat him, join him. But
smooth. I will comment. I do have one negative for this team. It is actually the speed tiers. Your fastest mon's
yeah,
base 110. The Tailwind is good on Pellet Burr, but it's also Pellet Burr, so I don't know how consistent it'll be. That's actually my main critique of the team. It doesn't really go very fast.
yeah,
I know Steel is obviously going to airstream boost, and on a team like this, it's not going to matter as much, but it's still worth mentioning that, like, if you get weather advantage, you probably keep speed control for a couple turns.
yeah. I was gonna say too, like the Trick Room mode is like not like it's not Trick Room soft per se, but it's not like super great against opposing Trick Room either. I don't think.
No,
Um,
it's kind of got a
like
neutral matchup.
yeah, like Duosion's fine. Sudowoodo is like, I mean, it's Sudowoodo. But the other thing I was gonna say is like, to me, I don't know. To me, I guess Sock has base 125 attack, so that's pretty high. But the it's much more special this team than physical, which is like not a huge issue. But
It could make prepping for
I don't know.
Steela easier, though.
Right, but I mean, Steela, like I could actually see Steela having to go physical sometimes,
Yeah,
which is not an overtly bad thing. I think
no.
physical Steela is pretty much like only very slightly less viable than regular like special Steela. But yeah, I mean, I don't have a ton to say about this team. It's the tried and true Celesteela Rain comp, and it's got a Tapu plus Feeble Core, which is also very tried and true. Yeah, this team has the sauce.
Yeah, it has the sauce for sure. I will also comment Feeble will work pretty well outside of terrain too. Don't be surprised to see it outside of terrain. All right. And our number
Oh
one
yeah,
team, drum roll, is Rolos of Mass Magikarps. This team is cracked.
to probably nobody's surprise.
Yeah, this team
Uh,
is absolutely cracked.
so Rolo had the wheel pick, and he abused it very very well. I think the way he drafted, like the order he took things in, I think it was great. So basically, he has Clefable, Cobalion, Vileplume, Aerodactyl, Heliolisk, Torracat, Cryogonal, Dragapult, Meowstic, Male, Octillery, and Solrock. So, I totally put the wrong speed tiers on this slide. So ignore those.
Those are hunters, yes. This team
Yeah.
has actually cracked speed tiers.
Yes. So the obviously the main thing that I think puts this team over the top, and so there's not that many teams where I can see the top like 3 to 5 mons and be like, okay, this is good, like almost regardless of what is underneath it. But when you have Dragapult, Clefable, Cobalion, and Meowstic as your top four, it's like you can't really go with that? Like, to mess that comp up, you'd have to be like not even like you'd have to have like literally not a brain. Like do you know what I'm saying? Because it's like that first four is it it functions very well on its own, so it leaves you pretty much like free reign to like take whatever you want around it and tailor the rest of the team however you want. But then also like he can lead like any of those four. Like if he leads one of like two of them, what is he doing? Is he doing follow me, or you know, is he doing beat up Dragapult into Cobalion? Is he maxing Dragapult and you know running like coaching Cobalion, or like you know, uh, what's Clefable doing? What's Meowstic doing? They have such deep move pools and such good like role versatility. On top of the fact that he also has like Aerodactyl is a crazy Tailwind setter. Cryogonal is great, tier 5 value. Solrock is also fine, tier 5 value. Octillery is fine. It's a water type, I guess.
It's a good trick room
The
one.
the yeah, yeah. The mini Suncore here with like Heliolisk and Vileplume, I don't mind. I don't know if it's like the best possibility. I don't remember exactly what was left when he took those. But he does have Prankster Sunny Day with Meowstic. And Torracat is, while I think people tend to overrate it a little bit, I think for tier 4 it's still definitely good value. But yeah, overall, I could probably talk about this team for a while just because it's got so much going on. But I think that the overall cohesiveness of this team and the amount of different modes it can do is like pretty much unmatched in this division. And I think like prepping for this team is going to be like a literal nightmare. Because it's like, I mean, you have to get into Rolo's head and you have to think, okay, what's his Dragapult set going to be? What's his Cobalion set going to be? What's his Clefable going to do? And I think obviously you have to do that to a certain extent against everybody, but like there's some teams where you can like kind of semi autopilot against, and this is not one of those. What do you think about it, Ryan?
Yeah, I thought this team was a pretty easy number one, if I'm being honest. I really like a lot of the teams prior to this one. And this team does have flaws, which we are going to get into. But, like, overall, I mean, this team. So, first things first, Cobalion is a mon that had a very nice performance last season under Bene. And Bene ran both physical and special sets under it. And the capacity for this team to not only run, like, beat up Cobalion and also just, like, Meowstic fake tears something and then Cobalion nukes it with a steel spike that's really strong. Like that really sells that mon. Like as a tier 2, I feel like Cobalion can be underwhelming. It is not underwhelming in the slightest on this team. It is absolutely massive. I ran Clefable plus Dragon type and it got me to finals last season. It is a very strong combo. It's very hard to stop Clefable plus a Dragon type from basically doing what they want to you. Clefable supports Dragapult exceptionally well. It also does support that. It also does support the Cobalion well and some of the other offensive threats on this team. I really love the Aerodactyl pick, both as a max option and as a Tailwind setter. I think a Nerve is also especially good for this team. I think that there are times when this team will encounter weakness berries, and the ability for it to just kind of ignore them is going to be huge. I actually think the Sun mode is super viable when I think people are sleeping on it. Because, like, a lot of people are probably like, well, yeah, like, you know, Meowstic, I can just, you know, fake it out and then the sun won't go up. It's like, okay, but also Dragapult has the best speed of any Pokemon drafted and has Sunny Day and cannot be faked out. Not only that, it has Flamethrower and can just max Flare if it wants to, next to a Vileplume. And then you're screwed because Vileplume can after you in Sleep Powder and Moonblast. And Heliolisk has a higher special attacking stat than Charizard and has solar power. So, like, he can just, like, absolutely nuke you with that out of nowhere. Like, it's just something he can slot on. Like, he can just, like, tech a fire move and then all of a sudden switch his entire team to sun at the drop of a hat. That is nuts. The main issue
with this really stronger than Charizard.
Well, yeah, it has a higher special or no, I think it has the same special attacking stat.
They're the same. Yeah.
But you know what I'm saying. Like,
Yeah, yeah, I got you.
The fact that a tier 4 Pokemon is getting the same kind of sun boosted attack. I mean, obviously, it's not like going to use fire type moves, but the general idea of Heliolisk being so much valuable offense in tier 4, in addition to the offense that's already on this team, is kind of bananas to me. The biggest weakness of this team, and then Cryogonal can weakness policy proc as well. And then obviously coaching Cobal. The big thing with this team is it is Trick Room soft. That is the biggest weakness of the team. Yeah. Solrock gets Trick Room. I think Meowstic also gets it. But it's Prankster Trick Room, so it's kind of weird because I think that gives it -5 instead of -6 priority. So I don't really know how useful that'll end up being.
I think that really hurts it that much, does it?
I don't think it does. And then
it does get Trick Room, yeah.
Yeah. And then the Octillery is not bad in Trick Room. You can like Water Spout and do some stuff in Trick Room with Octillery. So like it has some Trick Room mons, but like at the end of the day, this team is kind of Trick Room soft. Its main way to get around Trick Room is going to be like Vileplume, Octillery, a lot of like the low tier stuff. So like I do see Trick Room as being a potential issue for the team. And I think the main supplement for is honestly Clefable. I had my Clefable in Trick Room all the time, and that was what tended to stopgap it, was just being able to follow me with my fast stuff, so that I could get KOs even though I was in Trick Room. But it's difficult to play around. So that's my big critique of the team. I mean, really, it's the Trick Room. But I mean, outside of that, it's got, I think, in my opinion, I think the Sun mode is perfectly feasible to slap on most weeks. I think Torracat's fine enough support. I think Aerodactyl's great. I think his top core 4 of Mons is just ridiculous from a versatility and prep standpoint. You're going to be so hard pressed. He can run basically whatever sets he wants on those Mons and have them work. This is a very, very good team. Watch out for it. Congrats to Rolo. I really love this team. I think it has definite, like, massive potential.
Yeah, something else that I did want to touch on this one is another potential issue I see with it is I think I remember you writing something like this on your little doc you sent me about with all the notes, but like
yeah,
if you figure out what this team is doing in game 1, it might make games 2 and 3 a lot harder.
Yes.
While it does have multiple modes it can run on like at the same time, once you figure out sets, but I don't even know if that's a weakness as much as it is just maybe.
Yeah, my comment was more so, I think this team wins a lot of game 1s. I'm not sure how many game 2 and 3s it wins if the opponent adapts well.
Right. Well, that was kind of the point that I was touching on. Like,
yeah,
I think Rolo. I think this is a team where it's very important to conceal information, like, and play as conservatively as you can. Which is not even necessarily a flaw, just something something specific about the comp you have to work with. But yeah, and also I should say too, like I don't hate the Sun Core. I did wonder if there was better things at the time, but also tier 4 and tier 3 for those I think feels fine. So it's not like something I hate. Also, Heliolisk does function okay outside of Sun too.
Yeah, Heliolisk actually can do quite a bit. Stuff. Yeah,
for sure. Well, all right, everyone. Thank you for watching the Empoleon Division Great Lakes Draft League Season 2 Power Rankings. Please let me know. You know, me and Ryan's DMs are always open if you want suggestions or anything. If you want something to change about your team.
Yeah.
If also you can always DM us and yell at us, tell us we were wrong. Actually, do that publicly. That's more fun.
I will say this is probably one of the more unhinged PRs I've had. So
yeah, dude, I was planning on like trying to do Quillfish PRs within the next like day or so, but those might be waiting because this was a little unhinged. Well, thanks for doing these with me, Ryan, and thank you for watching, everybody.
No problem. Hope everybody has a great rest of the week, and we'll see you with the next PRs. Bye.